I got asked to tell a story, this story actually, in a retreat in Montana. And it was really eye-opening because I didn't want to share the story. And I had a resistance to sharing the story because I thought, why would anyone care, right? This is my story of being injured in Africa. Like, why does it matter? Who cares that I got injured in Africa? But something magical happened after I shared the story. And that was other people saw themselves in the story that I told. I gave people permission to have a conversation around something. And what I realized was the story was not about me. It was never about me. The story was always about someone else seeing themselves in my story. And that opened this whole world of storytelling for me, whether it's healing a relationship with somebody, whether it's literally preventing them from having self-harming thoughts. We gave them permission to say, you're not alone. And it is okay to have a dialogue and a conversation around it. And if you can't find anyone else to have it with, call me up. We will have it with you.
Yo, you made it. My name is Omar Shaker, and I'm honored to welcome you to the Gumcast, where we have deep conversations about the human spirit and what keeps us going despite the shittiness of it all. Our goal is to encourage you to feel seen, heard, and understood. So tune in for real and raw conversations and become part of them on findgumption.com. Dr. G, welcome to the Gumcast. It's a favorite letter here.
Thank you very much. Yes, my favorite letter too, for obvious reasons.
Thanks for having me here. It's so special to be recording this in DC, your home, in your office, where a lot of the creativity happens.
This is where the magic happens.
This is where the magic happens.
Well, my kind of magic, the creativity magic.
Yes, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. Yeah. So it's a perfect setup. Thanks, and it's a perfect day too in DC. It's very exciting for me to see all these leaves fall also, and all the colors changing. Really inspires me, gets my soul going and creating. So
this is my favorite time of the year. I think just seeing the colors of the leaves change, the climate change. I like a little bit of a colder climate, but like where you're wearing sweaters in the evenings, but you can still dress down during the day. But yeah, just to paint the scene, we're in my office here. Mm-hmm. I have an obsession with books, and I'm sure a number of your listeners probably do as well. And so
we're looking at about 16 to 20 different shelves with at least 15.
Floor-to-ceiling books and probably books that span a century in terms of the age and when they were published. Everything was as early as the even probably 1800s to things that are probably bought yesterday. I have this backlog of books that builds up on my desk. There's a term for it, but I keep forgetting what it is.
The term that you describe yourself with is status quo agitator, and I love that. I've been a bit of a fanboy for your work for a long time.
Oh, thank you.
We're going to talk about our stories. Part of my story is that, I feel like I've known you for a long time, even though you don't remember the last time I interviewed you. It's cool. I'm not taking that personally, but you're as close also as a celebrity as I ever got to have on the podcast. And you are, I know you don't identify with that yourself, but to me, as someone going into healthcare technology at a very early age, you were that. And so thanks for your friendship. And we also reconnected about more than a year ago, right? When you got your award.
It's been a couple of years, yeah.
It's been a couple of, yeah. When you got the award for Superhumans,
yes,
which is an excellent podcast that I found really inspiring and is very rooted in storytelling.
It
is also a format that I love, and as a writer, I'm exploring. So we're definitely going to be talking about that, but it's such a pleasure to be in your space and to have you here and to be your friend.
Thank you. And the sentiment is returned as well. And I think, where have you been all these years? I don't know what that gap happened in between, but we're definitely cut from the same fabric.
Definitely. And I think throughout the podcast, we might explore a lot of these themes, especially people coming from the mold of being like society tells them to be. And being a doctor kind of necessitates that, to just really going off rails, to becoming our creative selves, to becoming our more authentic expression of our souls, if you will. So I definitely, see you and feel inspired by you. And another thing that we have in common is Kenya, because Kenya is a huge part of both our stories.
That brings up some interesting memories.
Yeah, and speaking of storytelling, we love to start the episode by a story that the audience can really get to connect with you, the human behind you, because we're all informed and biased by our own stories. And I want to get into what storytelling means for you, but let's start with a story. And I'd love for you to share your story about the really exciting and traumatic experience that you had on a safari in Kenya, because as Kenya has inspired so much of my creativity too. So why don't we start there?
Sure. So let me first predicate and say that I think we all have a story to tell, and there are certain stories that have a profound impact on our lives in the number of things that we do. And this is certainly one of those stories for me. It's very personal, but it's also can make a lot of people squeamish. So for those who don't like stories that can get a little, I don't want to say ugly, but it'll make you squeamish. Let's just say that. Let me paint a scene for you. It was a beautiful night. I'm with my family. I have a wife and two children, and they were young at that time. I think one was maybe 9 and the other was 7. And we were out on a charity excursion in Kenya. But before that, we were in a safari in the Masai Mara region, and we were having a beautiful time, seeing incredible animals with an incredible group of people. And I had a fateful night that would basically, unbeknownst to me, change the trajectory of a lot of things for me. When we came back from a safari trip during the day, the evening was just turning, the moon was coming out, and the drinks had come out, and we were about to have feast on a nice meal. We're around a bonfire. And the Masai Mara tribesmen, we can hear them in a distance with their chanting and their singing, and it started coming closer and closer. And as they came up, they were doing their signature dancing and jumping and playing and singing, and then asked us all to join in. And so we were all chanting and dancing around the bonfire. Now, for those who know some of the traditions of the Masai Mara, they have this tradition of seeing, as part of their dance, who can essentially jump the highest. And it's really interesting. If you've never seen it, go pull up a video of it. And so my son and I decided to join in on their dancing. In a split second, I fell to the ground, and I felt like that fall to the ground was an eternity, right? So it was a split second jump, but my right foot landed on the ground. And as I toppled over to the left side, I noticed my left leg clamp back like a rubber band. And when I looked down, I saw my kneecap in my thigh. And I don't know what reaction to have except, oh shit, like what do I do now? We're in the middle of nowhere. The pain hasn't yet settled in. And the doctor in me basically says, listen, if this is some sort of dislocation of the kneecap, I need to shove it in place really quickly. Otherwise, the inflammation is going to prevent me from doing anything. And so what I did is when I fell to the ground, I extended out my left leg, which is the injured leg, and I took the kneecap and I took my left hand and I shoved it down back to where it should be, thinking that maybe I'll pop it back in place. And then I noticed really quickly that the kneecap just sprung back to its location into the thigh, and my knee collapsed again because it had nothing holding it down. So at that point, I knew something very serious was wrong. And pain kicked in. You'd think that in a group of individuals that somebody would have some sort of pain medication, but it turns out that nobody did. And fast forward a whole series of events that happened, it turns out that I had ruptured my patellar tendon, which is a very rare injury, but it was a complete patellar tendon rupture, which basically snaps the tendon that's connecting my knee to my leg. And that's why it pulled all the way back. Now, I didn't know this at the time. We didn't know what the injury was. We had no internet connection. We had no way of reaching out to anyone to really save us. So we did have a walkie-talkie connection or some sort of rudimentary connection into Nairobi, and asked if I could get medevaced out or flown out that night. But because it was nighttime, there's a lot of risks involved here. And the medevac crew was like, listen, we don't know if we fly in. First of all, we don't know where you are. So you're gonna have to signal to us where you are in the safari with lights and flashlights and so forth. And maybe we can capture some indication of where you are. But even if we do identify you, I don't know if we're landing on a giraffe's head, or we're landing on a tree. Mm-hmm. And so it's really hard to decipher. And they're like, you can't venture out of your camp because if you have internal bleeding, you are literally dead meat because you will be hunted. And so we had to remain within the perimeter of our camp and wait till the morning, which is about 14 hours later, before they could get me to an airfield to get medevaced out.
14 hours.
14 hours later. So they put me on the back of a truck, and there was no roads there. So it's basically bumps all across, really painful. And I got my first dose of pain medicine, fentanyl, when I was in that plane.
Wow. So you spent almost a day with that kind of trauma, no pain medication whatsoever. Wow.
And my family was still there, and I tried to downplay it as much as possible.
I'm dying to ask what was going on in your mind, and how did you survive? Did the pain subside after a while? What was your...
I think the pain normalized. I don't think it went away.
Mm-hmm.
It did normalize. Our bodies have an incredible way of adjusting our chemicals to accommodate these types of things, and an incredible survival mode of what kicks in at that time. But it's truly a test of character, truly a test of resiliency. It's a test of many things.
Yeah.
At that time that you don't even realize is something that I possess or not, right? You discover bits and pieces of yourself as you're going through the trauma itself. So it was really eye-opening to me on a number of factors in terms of how can I withstand adversity? What do I do when faced with adversity? What things are important to me? How do you prioritize decisions in life? Where does family play a role in these moments like this? There's so many questions that arose at that time. But when I did get flown back and I did have the surgery, which is in and of itself a whole other story, it gave me time to reflect on all of this. Mm-hmm. And I really discovered incredible things about me as an individual that I've now applied to my life.
So one of these things I know is this mantra that you've been living your life by since then, which is go be do.
Yes.
And I heard you talk about that, but tell us more about this mantra and how it got shaped by this experience.
Yeah, so go be do, and I'll get to how it got shaped, but go be do stands for go to interesting places, be with interesting people, and do interesting things. And in my reflection and coming back, I think like everyone's life, I'm in my 40s, you tend to have a lot of things going on in your life. Some things are important, some things aren't important. But when you go through a really adverse moment like this in your life that really tests what matters to you, you want to somehow figure out how to do away with the things that are not that important to you in life. And so for me, my mantra became go be do, and it's for that particular time, and I still use it today, but it became my guiding North Star, so to say. How do I make decisions that ultimately choose between the things that I should be doing versus the things that I should not be doing? And so if it doesn't fit into one of those categories of being in interesting places or being with interesting people, I won't be with them. Like, life is too short to surround yourself with negative energy, to surround yourself with the naysayers, to surround yourself with people who ultimately don't matter. Yet we spend many of our hours and time doing just that. And so this became my filter in life in helping me make decisions on what to pursue, both in life and in work.
That's fascinating. And it resonates. Like I feel I'm implementing it now with being in your interesting place, sitting with you, doing this podcast. It's very close to the word gumption too, which has resonated with me for a long time, of being in the kind of doing things without any sense of doubt. Like you're 100% sure that you're all in about this one thing that you're doing and in the moment. And that's a very empowering feeling also. They also both start with G, which is also...
Back to the letter G.
Back to the letter G.
It all comes back to G.
And you have two Gs. You're Gautam Gulati.
I do.
Yeah. The concept of go be do is something that really sticks out. How does that all then play into your creativity, and what happened to your creative self then from that moment on?
I think it's funny because you can only, like Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots looking back and understanding how the thread is connected over time. It really took that moment in time to understand that I've had built up creativity since my younger childhood that essentially got pulled out of me when I went through medical training, because you're not supposed to be creative when you're in the medical field, or at least that's the impression or what we've been told. And so this built up energy of my creativity really came to a head during this trauma that I had, because it really made me focus on asking the question of what really matters to me, and why can't I still do some of this creative stuff? And so, as I was exploring some of my own creativity in my writing and my speaking and some of the things that I was building, I got asked to tell this story actually, in a retreat in Montana. And it was really eye-opening because I didn't want to share the story. And I had a resistance to sharing the story because I thought, why would anyone care? Right? This is my story of being injured in Africa. Like, why does it matter? Who cares that I got injured in Africa? But something magical happened after I shared the story. And that was other people saw themselves in the story that I told. I gave people permission to have a conversation around something. And what I realized was the story was not about me. It was never about me. The story was always about someone else seeing themselves in my story. And that opened this whole world of storytelling for me that we channeled into a show called Superhumans, which you briefly mentioned before, and has won several awards. But we really tried to capture that element of creativity and storytelling and channel that through Superhumans. But that's how it's related to this Kenya event.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And with Superhumans, you try to recreate that, but for others, right? One thing I find really interesting about your format is that you remove yourself. And you were telling me something about how storytelling is also about removing the main character so that we can become our own heroes and relate to it. Tell me more about how you've implemented that through Superhumans and what kind of response did you get?
Yeah, it's been a really, again, Superhumans has been an interesting self-discovery process as well, and understanding how we tell stories and what resonates and what makes for a good story. There are interesting things. Superhumans, by the way, for those who aren't familiar with it, is basically an audio storytelling platform that prescribes stories as a form of medicine. So we use it as a form of healing and giving other people permission to see themselves and have dialogue around important topics in different worlds of health. And Superhumans, what's fascinating is we all have stories that we interpret ourselves, right? We tell ourselves stories about ourselves. And in the process, like you mentioned, removing ourselves from the story itself, we learn something really fascinating, is that our storytellers don't love sharing the stories that they tell us. And I think that's really interesting, is because we all want to create and build a story that we think paints us in a better picture and in a better light. But those aren't the relatable stories, right? Those are the headlines. Those are the things that we fabricate on social media and things like that. At the end of the day, we're all human. And what we relate to is the humanness inside of our stories. But oftentimes, I don't want to say an ugly side of us, but it's a side of us that makes us feel uncomfortable. Maybe it's something that we're not proud of. Maybe it's an addiction. Maybe it's something we're in a period of life that we struggled with and we're still struggling with or couldn't get over. Maybe it's something about abandoning somebody else and we're not proud of. Maybe it's about bullying. But these are all important stories to tell because these are universal truths that we can all relate to. And so we try to capture that essence of storytelling in the episodes that we produce. And oftentimes when we go into the creative methodology of it, we don't even know what that story is going to be. So we oftentimes say we're putting together a puzzle and we've got 1,000 pieces that we're going to cover in talking about your story or stories. And we will understand what the cover of the puzzle box is once we get all of those pieces together, and then we're going to craft it together. So that's how we look at story crafting.
That's totally how I feel now in trying to piece all the pieces. And I know so much about you, and there's so many interesting places we can go. I almost want to pack in so much into this one episode. Thanks for sharing the story about Superhumans. What's one of the most rewarding moments that you've had in building Superhumans and recording that podcast so far, which I know is a lot of work?
It was a lot of work. So it's definitely not something easy to do. We wanted to create our own methodology. So for me personally, I think that there's a personal, internal and external moments of proudness, right? The internal piece for me is I've always been told as being a doctor that you're not creative. I've been creative. I know I've been creative my entire life. I've just never had the channel to relay that and to produce it and to prove it. And so for me, winning the awards and producing stories and creating our signature methodology has probably been the proudest moment of my life, independent of family and all that kind of stuff, of course. But like for my career, that was certainly the proudest moment of my life because it didn't just validate what I already knew about myself in terms of being able to produce creative projects, but I think it also sent a signal to the world that, hey, he can actually do something creative. And maybe, again, maybe it's a story that I was telling myself over the years in assuming that other people thought that I wasn't creative. I don't know, but it was definitely a defining moment for me. But more importantly, I think what was really validating for me with Superhumans, and I have a co-producer, Pamela Rothenberg, who also produces the show with me, we told ourselves that if we could change one person's life as a result of producing and sharing these stories with the world, that is enough for us to have made a difference. And we got emails and texts and phone calls from people saying that the stories told through Superhumans has literally saved their lives in many different ways. Whether it's healing a relationship with somebody, whether it's literally preventing them from having self-harming thoughts, we gave them permission to say, you're not alone. And it is okay to have a dialogue and a conversation around it. And if you can't find anyone else to have it with, call me up. We will have it with you. And so for me, what we set out to do, which was use these stories as some form of prescription, like a healing prescription, I think we did achieve it. Now, of course, getting the word out is a bigger thing, but for those, the tribe that we've touched has truly been transforming, and I cannot be prouder of it.
With Brene Brown's work around shame, one thing that she says there are three things about shame. The first thing is that we all have it. And the second thing is that we don't want to talk about it. And the third thing is that once we talk about it, it's released. Yeah. And I think that's the power of these conversations.
Well, I think we need to give people safe spaces, right? I think what we do, and talking a little bit about our methodology with Superhumans, is we have a pre-conversation to get familiar and understand where they're coming from. And we actually spend some time before even recording just grounding ourselves, going through breath exercises, doing a little bit of meditation. And it's selfish of me to ask others to share and be vulnerable if I'm not vulnerable myself. So it's exhausting in a sense that I have to bring my true vulnerability to the conversation as well, and be open to expressing that with either a friend or a stranger, whoever it is that we're interviewing on the other end. Because I can't ask them to do that if I don't do it myself. And so this element of shame, it's a bi-directional thing. Like, we're not going to open up to somebody if we feel like they're walling themselves off unless we open that up as well.
That's why I started with the story of you not remembering me. Had to be vulnerable. So I wanna switch gears for a second here, but before we do, I wanna cover something. Speaking of symbols, mantras, and the letter G that is very present for us today, you mentioned a few things that you take from symbols in your life and how they play a huge role. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, I think symbols are often those things that are in everyone's lives, but not really paid attention to that much. And we have symbols for different things, like in companies, et cetera, that represent certain brands. If you think about it, when people get tattooed and they get inked up, those are basically symbols that have meanings to them in life. And I think it's important, just like I have that mantra, go be do, I have a symbol personal that I've put on shirts and hats and things that is basically an abstract rendering of Pablo Picasso's bull. And that symbol to me represents things that are important and reminders to me on how to live life. And what that bull symbolizes to me is simplicity and perspective. And so in everything that I do, both in work and life, like, don't complicate things if they don't need to be complicated, right? Simple is best. And I think that's something that I've always struggled with, because I tend to be, I'm probably doing it now, being verbose or talking too much or just complicating things unnecessarily because I feel like I have to get it all out there. Like, maybe that's the doctor in me. And the other thing is perspective. I think for me, as somebody who is deemed an expert in certain spaces, the most important, if you're an expert who thinks you know everything, you're not an expert. You have to have open perspective. You have to admit the fact that you don't know everything. And I think that having that symbol as a constant reminder to say, listen, you're not as smart as you think you are, and open up your perspectives and be open. And so for me, even if I flip on channels, not to get into politics, but I'll switch news channels back and forth just to get perspective. No right or wrong. Truth is in the eye of the beholder. right? At the end of the day, your truth might be different from my truth, but it's the same truths to ourselves, right? And so understanding where that other perspective is coming from and how that might impact how I think about things is extremely important. Back to your original question of the symbol, I think everybody should map out what symbol represents them. And again, that symbol can change, right? For me, the abstract bull led a period of my time where I was creating things resemblance of that. It still stays, but my symbol has now adapted. And my symbol that is representing me most these days is a black sheep.
Black sheep, why is that?
Because I've always been the black sheep of the family for me. I've always been the one to do things in a very unconventional and contrarian way.
And you had a whole brand called Unusual.
I had a brand called Unusual. And so for me, and it's funny because it always comes back to something that reminds me of earlier days of this. And so black sheep is not just what the symbol stands for, but it also has personal meaning because back in high school, I used to throw these little cafeteria parties where I would DJ and we would have these lip sync contests. And me and my three other buddies, Alex, Jeff, and Young, we did a lip sync battle that we won, and we did it to Black Sheep's The Choice Is Yours, right? So I don't know if you guys are dating myself, but it's who's the black sheep? What's a black sheep? So engine number 9, who's the transit on the line? That song has meaning. It was sung by Black Sheep. It dates me back to it. It just gives me good nostalgia and memories. But it's funny, again, looking back at the dots, it all circles back to today. And a lot of the things that I try to teach and write about and teach my clientele and train others about is how to think differently. And so I'm pulling in elements of what it means to be a black sheep and how we can use that for good.
It's interesting. And to bring my story full circle, the article that I wrote after that interview was called Our Unusual Future. Just in case you want to check it out.
Yes.
And it's a really good reminder talking about all these symbols about how also handicapped or limited our words are. And a symbol can be a much stronger reminder that we relate to on an even more guttural level. And Carl Jung has this book called Men and His Symbols, and it talks about all these things that even show up in dreams from archetypes, and something that we talk a lot about on this podcast too, of how an image can be much stronger than a word. So, right? And we have this phrase called a picture is worth 1,000 words. And you have a similar one, but that you've extrapolated on stories. And what is that?
Yeah, picture paints 1,000 words. And so I love that phrase and I agree with it. And so for me, to ladder it up yet at an even higher level, to me, a story is worth 1,000 pictures, right? So if you can imagine that, the amount of pictures and the amount of word that goes into a story are truly endless. And so again, going back to it, just think about this as a listener and see how it impacts you. But if a painting is worth 1,000 words and a story is worth 1,000 paintings, what does that tell you?
100 million words.
What's the math there? Let's get out the calculator.
Tell us a little bit about your latest foray into the digital health world and you coming back into healthcare with the Well Home, which is a very exciting take on our well-being that I think we hugely miss. That health really does not happen in the hospital, right? It happens exactly where we live and how we live. So tell us a little bit about that and what you're up to.
The Well Home for me, thanks for asking that question. The Well Home for me is deeply personal. And I'm super excited about because I think it will actually, going back to stories, it'll change the narrative of people's lives and stories as a result of the Well Home. If you go down to the root issue of why we feel really disconnected in healthcare, is because we've lost the humanity and the human aspect of what healthcare was meant to deliver. And if you think about it and strip away all of the bells and whistles and things that we do in healthcare, it really is just about one person telling their story to another individual, right? The patient telling their story to the physician. And the physician's job is essentially to find the right ways and the right tools to make sure that the patient's story has a happy ending. That's it. If we strip everything, that's what healthcare is about, and then what we add to it and offer to it. And so it stems down for me is the reason why this becomes personal is my dad, who was a surgeon, got diagnosed with Alzheimer's back in 2013. And he ended up passing away from it in 2018, but the process was really eye-opening for me because I became the primary caretaker and my parents moved into my home. And as a doctor, I had all the tools at my disposal to give him the best clinical treatment and get him the best access of care. But that really wasn't changing his narrative. And what I realized was how he experienced his day-to-day in our home, which is where our health system tends to abandon us, is when we enter our home. It's where we live with all of our conditions. That's what had the greatest impact on his, not just health outcomes, but his quality of life. And so for me, by making simple adjustments in the home, allowed me to adjust the narrative of his life, or whatever remaining time he had in his life, to ensure it had the best, happiest ending that he could possibly have. And so very simply, that's what the Well Home is trying to achieve. But from the business standpoint, for those listening to understand what it does, it's interior wellness design for people living with chronic conditions. And so you can take that same example of somebody with Alzheimer's or dementia and try to alter the story of somebody who's living with migraines, or somebody who has asthma, or somebody who has a child with autism, and that the list goes on and on. And so my job in operating the Well Home is to figure out ways to change the narrative of the lives of people's story by utilizing their home as a way to create a happy ending.
That's incredible. I think it's really exciting. I think it tackles a piece of the puzzle that we're missing, a huge piece, like the centerpiece actually, and everything else is peripheral. And I think if we get the home right, then we might not need to use a lot of healthcare, which we keep talking about higher quality, lower cost, but we're missing.
That's the idea, right? And we start getting into, I don't want to get down into the numbers and specifics here, but 93% of our chronic conditions are actually preventable chronic conditions. Meaning there are things that we're doing to our bodies or ourselves that are creating these chronic conditions. So if we're creating them, we should be able to reverse it. And so we can not only just prevent, also manage, and maybe even reverse many of these chronic conditions and not even enter the healthcare system if we could. That's the ultimate goal, is to make chronic illness optional.
That brings our story full circle here. First, is there anything else you want to add about Well Home or Superhumans?
No, I'm always curious as to what people think of Superhumans. And if you have comments, feedback, or it moves you in some way, go to superhumans.health to take a look at it, or just search Superhumans in whatever podcast platform that you listen to podcasts. The Well Home, you're welcome to go to thewellhome.co to learn more about that. Or just if you're curious about all the things that I'm working on, go to imdrg.com.
Dr. G, thanks for being who you are. And thanks for having me in your home, in your creative space, and for teaching me about storytelling, and for agitating the status quo of this podcast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this. Thank you, Omar.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, man. I really appreciate your time.
This is great. I love this. Like, this is Go Be Do. This is it, right? Like, you don't do this for everyone, but you're super fast. As much as I'm an inspiration to you, you're an inspiration to me. Like, I'm learning from you just as much.
Thanks, man. It means a lot.